Welcome to A Scrap Life, a podcast solely focused on the hustlers, grinders, operators, and business owners who live and breathe the scrap metal industry every day. We are the original recyclers. No suits required, just guts and hard work. Here is your host, Brett Eckhart.
So I'm sitting here today, another podcast, Scrap Life podcast. Made it with my way out to Texas. Made it all the way to Houston, Texas. To start in Dallas. Made the 3-hour drive, about 3.5-hour drive down to Houston to hang out with Keny Daniele at Prestige Scrap and Metal. And because I fucked the name up probably 4 times while I was saying, okay, how am I going to introduce this? I'm going to say, now tell me the story of how you come up with the name.
All right. So the way we came up with Prestige, so I started my company and out of a feasibility study in business school. That was about 12, 13 years ago. So we're trying to come up with the name, and I think I was with some buddies just talking, trying to come up with ideas. And we're watching a movie called Step Brothers with Will Ferrell.
Who is it with? It's Will Ferrell and somebody else.
And I always forget his name.
Oh, I know. Will Ferrell's the easy one to remember, and it's the other guy with the curly hair.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they kind of do the same thing. They're starting up a company and they're pitching it to their family. So I was like, all right, done. We're going Prestige worldwide.
Yeah.
Obviously not worldwide, but so that's actually how I came up with the name.
Okay, from Step Brothers. I always think, you hear about all these different business names, and guys that are 3rd generation, 4th generation, and the names don't necessarily match the times or whatever that they're in now, right? But one thing I appreciate about you that I didn't all the way know until sitting down with you today is I just assumed, oh, you're probably 2nd generation, right? But you're actually a 1st generation, in the scrap, recycling, automotive, recycling, parts, recycling industry. Nobody was before you, nobody showed you the business. You just kind of learned it by trial and error. So that's probably one of the biggest things I took away from this visit and this trip is the fact that you're a self-made guy. And that's who I always try and surround myself with, guys that are hustlers. You may be a 2nd generation or 3rd generation, but you want to put your own stamp on it, right? You get the opportunity to kind of do it your own way, from the very gate. So what year did you start? Give us kind of the background of your story.
Sure. So I wouldn't give myself that much credit. So I grew up in the industry. My father used to have a salvage yard. So growing up, I would always take his cars to a local shredder down the street.
Yeah.
And that's how I started going to the scrap yard, seeing all the cranes unloading the cars, throwing it in the shredder. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. So fast forward a few years, I'm in college, and we're having to do a business plan for our for some of the management classes. So while everyone else is doing, bars or restaurants or a party bus business, I was the oddball out, and I was like, well, screw it, I'm gonna do a scrapyard.
Yeah.
So did that for 2 years and started talking to my dad about it, and he had a property that he wasn't using. So we're like, okay, let's try to start up a scrapyard and see what happens. So started doing that, and then as soon as I graduated, moved back to Houston, and just started with me and another guy, and my dad helped me out with a forklift and a truck and a small excavator, and here we are.
So ultimately, and not to discount your parents and your dad are helping you out, right? That's never the goal. But when I say self-made, self-starter, it was your idea to do the business plan on starting a scrap metal recycling company. It was your idea to go down the automotive recycling side. So Where a lot of in our industry, it's a lot of like, and like I'm a third generation, right? So my grandfather started it in '72. My dad took it over, and then had Schnitzer come in as a partner in '97. We eventually bought him out in 2015. Became family owned again, but it's like a line of different family members and different people that have played a role. So yeah, for me, having your dad like help you out, that's awesome, right? And if it wasn't for my dad, if it wasn't for your dad, we probably wouldn't be sitting here today doing what we're doing. But you don't run across many people that are first generation that he had a salvage yard, but did he have the scrap component to it as well, or was it just automotive?
No, it's just automotive parts.
Okay, so you kind of cut your teeth on the automotive side, and then you're like, okay, look at all these cranes and look at all this big ass equipment, and you wanted to go down that road a little bit farther than just automotive.
Yeah, pretty much.
So are you a mechanical person? Like, do you fix cars? Do you like toil with them, tinker with them, or is it?
Not really, but I think I'm pretty creative on, having a vision and making sure that happens. So, because I knew I wanted a car shredder from the first time I saw it about 15, 18 years ago.
Yeah.
So I remember when I first got in the industry, and I was going to all the ISRI conventions, telling people that I wanted a car shredder back then when I first got started.
Yeah.
And everyone would just look at me as a, dumb young kid and just laugh at me. So, but I think that kind of gave me more drive to want one even more.
Yeah. Well, it's always the people that like discount you or that don't think you have the ability or capability of doing shit that like you can use as fire, like when you're in like nobody needs motivation when everything is good. Like nobody needs motivation to get up and go to work when you're making money and you start to see the fruit, the trees you planted start to bear fruit. But sometimes when the shit gets tough and you're in the middle of a big problem, you're trying to solve it, like that's when you can dig down and like, okay, all these fuckers that said I'd never do it or laughed at me, said I could never get over this, piece of it, I could never get over this hump. Those are the people that I'm like here to prove wrong, right?
Exactly.
Or just like that smirked at me when I told them I was gonna do something. They're like, like, and I feel like that's probably a component of like when you're like, I'm gonna own an auto shredder someday, and people were like, yeah, all right, whatever, dumbass kid. Right?
Pretty much, yeah. No, that's exactly how it went.
It's spot on. All right. So, when I was growing up, we just had like just an old dirt yard. Like a yard was, we had dirt. We, went to work with my grandpa or whatever. So I fell in love with the business super early. There's other stuff that we could do that probably could make more money, probably, or maybe is a little bit more sexy than like running around in mud and grease and equipment and nasty smelling shit. But because I loved it so early, I don't know any other way, right? So I feel like you and I probably have that piece of it in common. So when you were growing up, did you go hang out at the auto salvage yard? Like, or would you just was it a weekend job? Was it was it something you did in the summer, or were you always around?
No, that was 6-7 days a week. My dad never gave me it was very rare that he gave me a day off.
So what did you start out doing there?
So, I was at first just washing trucks, greasing trucks, picking up trash, cutting the grass. Then started driving a forklift, moving cars around, loading, unloading trucks.
Okay.
And then eventually just kind of driving trucks around the yard. I remember one time I got in trouble in school. I think I was in high school. I might have been 17, 18 years old. Came to work. My dad found out that I had gotten in trouble.
Yeah.
So he makes me get in an 18-wheeler and drive it across town to the dealership to drop it off. And at this point, I just knew how to drive them around the yard, just like first, second gear and reverse. So I didn't know how to go from high to low, any of that. So here I am, I'm 16, 17 years old and probably look like I'm 13 years old. hop in this truck and then drive it across Houston, just grinding every single gear until I made it. So that was quite the experience.
So that doesn't even sound like a punishment as a kid. Like, I feel like there's a certain amount of that's like fun, right? That you're actually getting to experience, like driving a truck and
Yeah, I mean, at the time it was scary, but after, it was a great story.
yeah. So how do you go from working in an auto salvage yard with your dad to now? I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to come down here, full disclosure, is you and I met at Isri last year, and you were kind of right in the middle of kind of going through the process of putting in a shredder, and because I am an equipment junkie myself, like I was like, damn, you're gonna put an auto shredder in, and then like just kind of watching you post, throughout the stages like of you putting it in this last year, really the infrastructure, the concrete work, and then slowly building into the equipment as you got ready and to get stuff going. How do you go from, I mean, what's the process of a small or whatever, I don't know how big your dad's operation was, working in auto salvage to own a full-blown shredder and everything that goes along with that? What does that look like? What's the process look like?
So, I mean, it's been a long road. So the process, I started out small and then eventually found my niche in cars. So about almost 3 years ago now, started a pick-apart yard. Okay. So a lot of these cars that we were buying a lot of them were still in decent shape, and we had the space over here. So little by little, I started fixing up a back piece of the property and staging cars back there. And now we've got about 1,300 cars back there, and averaging about 120 customers a day. So the pick-apart yard, that's actually been blown up, and eventually we're going to move it up to the front where I bought 34 acres. So once we're up there, I'd like to have maybe 2,500, 3,000 cars. And the pick-apart business is going to be a great way to feed the shredder. So, it makes me a little more aggressive to buy cars, and then it's a great feed for the shredder, so I don't really have to go out and try to buy dealer scrap or look too much for scrap when I can, if I can try to lock in at least 60-70% of my feed through my own yard.
Internal, right?
Yeah.
And you're not out there chasing
Correct.
Scrap,
Yeah.
which is probably why you didn't go with some huge mill.
Correct, yeah.
Right? Like you want to right size it, because I truly believe in the scrap industry. You operate, and you want to build into yourself the opportunity to grow. Like, you don't ever want to discount your ability to grow, especially if you're a guy like yourself or myself who's willing to go out and hustle up the business. But you also want to find your niche and build that out. And obviously you started on the automotive side, so you're like, okay, this is going to be my niche, and your ability to control your destiny internally, right? Where you're relying on your ability to feed your own shredder. I feel like that's probably a pretty goddamn smart move, in the fact that you're not saying, okay, I'm going to put in a mega shredder and I'm going to go out and chase 40,000 tons a month from everybody else, and compete. Because there's no, I've had the conversation with a few people now from this Houston area, and it's a competitive landscape, right? I mean, there's no shortage of people buying and selling and processing scrap around here.
Yeah, no, I mean, you've got every big player in Houston, so
yeah.
And they've got their quotas of meat, so it gets competitive.
Yeah. But like you said, like you've got a plan to feed yourself and do that. And to me, 100% makes sense. Like, now, I mean, understanding the vision, understanding where you're going. And you know what? Like, we were talking about this right before we started this podcast. Like, the reason why I do this podcast is because of guys like yourself, the next generation of people, or guys that are our age or in that range, that need someone to kind of kick them in the ass and say, like, you can do it, right? Like, I'm a big proponent I fucking wear the American flag hat for a reason, because I feel like there's more opportunity, like, in this country, if the people are just willing to fucking do stuff. Like, go try. You're gonna fail. Like, there's a certain amount of stuff that you're going to fail on. And some of it's going to be big, some of it's going to be small. But if you don't ever try, how will you ever know? And I feel like you right here is showing everybody like, you're fucking going to try. And it's something you've wanted for a long time.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And if that's, that's why I like doing it, is there's a lot of people out there that need that. Hey, go try it. Go get it done. Go see what can happen. You never know. You never know unless you give it a shot.
Yeah, and it's a fun industry. I've met so many amazing people in this industry. Some like I can call my best friend, it's always exciting to see him at the conventions, go out to dinner, have drinks after that.
Yeah, and so I mean that was going to be my next question is there anybody that's been helping you kind of like that's mentored you throughout this process, whether it's on the auto salvage side or on the scrap side, or is there anybody out there that's been a big help to you, getting answering any questions or anything like that?
Yeah, on the scrap side, a little bit. There's been a lot of people that have helped me throughout the years, and then on the automotive side, on the parts side, I've had two great guys. One, Chris Mantis from Tear Part in Salt Lake City, and another guy, Alan Preble from England.
Okay,
he's got one of the nicest yards. I think he's the largest privately owned guy in all of England. So randomly became friends with him, I think about 6 or 7 years ago. I went to England for their automotive recycling convention and met this guy over there who invited me to come check out his yard, which was insane. I think he's got like 4,000 or 5,000 cars in his yard, and he's got racks of cars 4 or 5 high. So he comes to the States every year for our auto recycling show. So over the years, we've become good buddies. And last year, he invited me to Monaco with him. I
saw that you posted that on a couple of that on LinkedIn. That looked like a fucking awesome trip.
Yeah, so that was awesome. So he keeps his yacht out there, and so we went and watched the Formula One race from his yacht, and then I'm going again next month with him.
That's awesome.
So he's been a great guy coaching me through on the automotive side. So no, it's great. But I always say it's like, it's not what you know, it's who you know, and you can't know enough people in this industry.
No.
A lot of people, if they're local, they're not really going to be willing to help, but, it's good to find guys in different regions of the country or, even the world, and a lot of people are going to be willing to help out or at least point you in the right direction.
I feel like scrap, for the most part, is still fairly local, right? And non-ferrous travels a little farther than ferrous, but on the ferrous side, it's still fairly local-ish, within a couple 100-mile radius. So I've always one of the things, big things I've tried to do is just network. Like you said, it's not necessarily what you know as much as who you know, because who you know can teach you what you need to know.
Exactly.
And so I'm big on the networking component, just for that reason, that I feel like, if I come down to Texas and I can learn 1 or 2 things, it's worth the trip, right? And I'm not competing against you for scrap. I'm just like, hey, show me what you're doing, and then you extend the favor back to the next guy and say, hey, you ever come to my area, I'll show you what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, whatever that looks like, and maybe you can pick off 1 or 2 things and take it back to your. And the more that the small, medium-sized operators, guys like yourself, myself, can network with each other and help each other, especially, we're not taking food off each other's table. We really aren't. We're actually probably helping put more food on each other's tables if we help each other be more competitive.
Yeah, for sure.
In our existing markets.
Yeah.
So I've always been a big proponent of that, is, calling out people that are helping you out, and as far as they're doing you solid and giving you information, and B, not being afraid to reach out and say, hey, can you help me here? I definitely don't know everything. There's so much about, even just walking around your shredder. I'm not an expert on shredding. I'm far from it, right? I like it. I try and understand it the best I can, but there's so much about it that's beyond my reach, right? Because I've never owned one. I haven't been around a lot of them. I've delivered a lot of scrap to them. I've hauled a lot of scrap out of them, but I've just never, operated one. But there's a lot of people out there that would love to help give you knowledge, right? And vice versa. Like there's a lot of people out there that someday, after you've ran that shredder for 5 years, someone from another market can call and say, hey, can you give me a little bit of guidance, right? And your willingness and your ability to pay it forward.
Yeah.
That feels like what's awesome about our industry.
Yeah. So this morning, actually, before you came, I had some guys from Louisiana that came out here, and they're currently about to pull the trigger on buying a shredder. So they came over here just to kind of look at the layout and see how we did it. So I spent maybe an hour and a half with them, gave them the full tour of the shredder, and kind of showed them, the things that we might have done wrong or wish we would have done different.
Yeah.
And then so tomorrow I've got another guy that's putting in a shredder. He's coming out here. We'll show him, what we're doing, how we did it. So, like that, I actually had some guys that let me go to their yard before we installed the shredder. So we got to see the way they laid it out, how they operate, and then, different things that they're doing that kind of gives them their own niche in the market. So, yeah, you can't go to enough yards. So,
Dude,
out of every yard, you'll pick up something else.
I have a saying that, your network is your net worth. Like, that's it, man. And
I agree 100%.
If you figure out how to build that network of people that you feel can give you some honest answers to questions, tell you if you're fucking up, or tell you if you're doing a job, or give you a shortcut, or whatever that is, the whole reason I started in Dallas is because I told somebody, I put on LinkedIn, I said, hey, I'm going to put a tire recycling facility together. Like, it's going to happen, right? And the next thing you know, I had Tom down in Texas who's like, hey, man, that's exactly what I'm doing. He goes, I got one, come take a look. And he's, I'll show you anything you want to see. And I'm like, really? And he goes, yeah. He just cold call reached out to me, right? And so I was like, all right, I'll go take a look. Next thing you know, I'm flying to Dallas, Fort Worth. I'm looking at his plant. We had ordered the same. He goes, this is the equipment I'm running. He goes, feel free to look around if you can find better equipment. Great.
Was this before this trip or?
Yeah, before this trip.
Okay, cool.
So this was like the end of this was like fall of last year. So we went and took a look, and I ended up ordering the same equipment. I liked that it was made in America. I liked it was made in. I could go look at it, and there's already 2 people running it that I could see. I'm like, okay, like this is gonna work for me, right? But without that phone call, without him reaching out to me and just saying, hey, come take a look, I don't know where I'd be. I don't know if I'd be ordering different equipment. I don't know if I'd like lay everything out differently, right? But it's because of that, because of our industry. And I feel like that's what, people say, oh, it's about the relationships. Like, it truly is about the network and the relationships. And that's why I push on the podcast. Like, nobody fucking pays me to do it. Like, I don't get any sponsors. Like, it's on my dime to fly out. But I feel like that's the good thing about our industry is somebody's going to help you, and you're going to help the next guy that wants to do something. You're going to help them create a couple shortcuts or save $500,000 or a couple $1,000,000 by doing it a certain way versus another way, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's what it's about. And and now if I call you up and say, hey, what are you doing, man? What's going on over there? Like, that's the conversation that started all. And I got my buddy down in Indiana, Jake Bronstein, who he called me up 3 years ago, right before COVID. He's like, hey, I'm building a yard. Can I come see your yard? I'm like, come see my yard. I'll walk you through everything. You decide how you want to lay yours out, how you want to do it, but you're more than welcome to come check anything out you want, right? And to this day, we have a great friendship. And it started with the phone call of, hey, I just want to come take a look.
Yeah, no, you gotta love those kind of relationships.
Yeah, that's what our industry's about. And I'll cut this off. But if there's anything you want to say or any advice you want to give, like, people as far as like on your business, on what you're doing, like, now's the time, man. Any wise words from the?
Yeah, well, when I started telling people that I was gonna put in a shredder, everyone's like, okay, you're crazy. You don't know the kind of headaches it is, and now I understand why everyone said that. So, but if anyone out there is looking at putting in a shredder, or not just a shredder, it can be any big processing equipment. Don't let what other people are saying intimidate you. If you think if you're pretty confident that you can make it happen, go for it.
I love it, man. Thank you, sir. Thanks for sitting down with me.
Oh,
Much
man,
appreciated.
Pleasure having you come down.
If you ever need anything from me, call me.
You got it.
All right.
Cool.
Take care.
I love it. That was perfect, man. 25